Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm the Omni viewer, and I'm here to do just a little more speculating about the recent Godzilla Kong Supernova teaser because everybody's talking about it at this point, so why not me as well? Although, first, I would like to address the other little ad thing that dropped at around the same time. That little Southeast Asia tourism ad that Godzilla appears in. You remember the one. I've seen a lot of people speculating that this is somehow going to be the new Godzilla design for whatever the next Takashi Yamazaki Godzilla movie is going to be that Toho is producing. And while I can't say with 100% certainty that it's not, I do have my doubts that it is. And my primary reason for doubting it is because I just don't think that Toho would reveal this new Godzilla design for a movie that's 2 years away in a tourism video. It just doesn't make sense to me. It seems more like they came up with this new design that is clearly reminiscent of the Godzilla minus one design with a few elements from other Godzilla designs thrown in. But they came up with that specifically for this ad in order to get people's attention. Because, hey, it's a new Godzilla design. Everybody's going to be talking about that. And aren't we? And of course, the whole reason Godzilla's even in the video is basically because it's a celebrity endorsement. Remember, this is a commercial for tourism in Southeast Asia. Who are you going to get to advertise that who has the global recognition and appeal to both adults and children and actually has at least something to do with the region? There are plenty of prominent human actors from Asia that they could have done, but none of them. This is not a knock against any of them, mind you, but none of them are quite as iconic as Godzilla. So naturally, the tourism board figured that using Godzilla would be the best option to get attention. And of course, Toho agreed to it because that keeps Godzilla in the public eye. Plus, it promotes all of their other stuff and generates all this talk. Even the green charging that he does, I mean, people are going crazy about that, saying they love that green heat ray that he never actually shoots in the trailer. But, that's not even the first time he's done it. It's not even the second time he's done it. First time any iteration of Godzilla had a green heat ray was in Godzilla the series, which was spun off from the 1998 movie and is the only good thing about the 1998 movie. But what also precedes this commercial is the Free Comic Book Day release from IDW, Godzilla the New Heroes, which is kicking off the Kaisei era, the first completely original Godzilla comic book universe. And in that series, Godzilla is going to have a green heat ray. Now, I can't prove that there's necessarily a connection, but at the same time, if people start looking up Godzilla with green heat ray or Godzilla with green fire or whatever, they're going to find images from this commercial, sure, but they're also going to find images from Godzilla the series and most likely the new IDW comics. So that's even more promotion across the board, right? Anyway, I just wanted to clear the air on that. Technically speaking, it is a new Godzilla design, even if it is a familiar one. But I don't necessarily think it has anything to do with the next upcoming Toho movie. At this point, we still don't even know if officially it's a sequel to Minus One or not. So we can just set that aside for now and say this design, in all likelihood, is just for the commercial. Maybe it'll wind up being used in the movie, whatever comes next, but we can't say that for certain. But now let's do some speculating on Supernova, because that's what everybody's talking about. Who is going to be the next villain? Now, all the clues seem to be pointing towards something to do with a space kaiju or space titan, because Titan is what they're referred to. But something to do with outer space. You know, the title refers to an astronomical phenomenon. The different people involved in the movie have been posting stuff that has aliens and stars in them. There's been different people brought in to do the behind the scenes work who have credits on things that involve extraterrestrials, which, you know, could just be a coincidence, that one. But it all seems to be pointing towards this idea that it's got something to do with space. So there are basically two options here. The space titan or titans can either be new creations or they can be familiar creatures. And a lot of people are speculating that it could be a familiar creature, specifically from the Godzilla universe. The most popular candidates at this point are Space Godzilla and Gigan, with Ghidorah trailing at a distant third, and of course there are always the possibilities of another King Ghidorah or some variation thereof. Now let's just follow this thread for a little bit. Assuming it is going to be a returning Toho Titan. Now, is it possible they actually are going to license another Toho monster? The thing is, I do think it is somewhat more likely after the release of the new Empire. There's been all kinds of talk about what went down behind the scenes involving Mothra's presence in the movie. There are some who said that Mothra was always meant to be in the movie from the beginning, and this new Titan they came up with, Phosphora, was a placeholder in case the deal couldn't work out. There are others who say that they originally wanted to go with Phosphor from the beginning and only went for Mothra after negative test screening feedback. I don't pretend to know the answers. All I know is that Mothra is in the movie. They renewed the license for her to be there. And the fans enjoyed it. Fans loved seeing Mothra come back, and of course, it was appropriate for her to be in the role they put her in because that's what was established earlier. And figures of Mothra released by Playmates connected to this movie have been flying off the shelves. So that's clearly a good sign. If the studios really were hesitant about licensing Mothra before the new Empire, after the new Empire, I think they're feeling a little bit more emboldened. So maybe they are looking into it. Maybe they're looking into relicensing Rodan because they still have him. At least presumably, because he's going to be in the next Justice League crossover. And maybe they are looking through the other Toho licensed creatures and seeing which ones would be appropriate. Another bit of evidence to suggest that it might be a Toho Titan is the fact that the teaser doesn't actually show us the monster. People have pointed out that when we got that first teaser and title reveal for the new Empire, we saw Scar King. He was cast in silhouette, sure, but we still saw him, and he was a completely new character. We obviously didn't know who he was. We'd never seen him before. So that got us speculating. Well, who is this guy? And the fact that this new teaser with the title reveal did not show a monster, there are those who are suggesting that maybe that means it's a familiar creature, familiar at least to longtime G fans. And that's also going to have people speculating because if it's a familiar one, which one could it be? Of course, there's also the possibility that they didn't reveal it because the design hasn't quite been finalized yet. At the same time, though, I think back to King of the Monsters and how it was right after Godzilla 2014 had a good opening weekend and they announced there was going to be a sequel. They let us know right away that they were going to get Mothra, Rodan, and King Ghidorah to be in that sequel. So at this point, who knows? Still, we're following this idea that it could be a familiar monster. And if it's going to be a space-themed idea, that means it's likely to be one of the familiar space monsters. So we already had King Ghidorah, and we already have Mechagodzilla, though Mechagodzilla's origin was kind of a combination of extraterrestrial and terrestrial. So who else is there? Well, like I said, the popular candidates are Space Godzilla and Gigan. Now, of those two, for me personally, even though I put Space Godzilla in the thumbnail for that first video, I actually have been thinking that Gigan is the more likely of those two candidates. Why? Well, partly because there's more official stuff with Gigan connected to the MonsterVerse than there is for Space Godzilla. The concept art for Godzilla King of the Monsters, for example, there were two different pieces of art connected to that final scene where Godzilla has defeated Ghidorah and he's surrounded by these other kaiju that kneel before him. And some of those pieces, well, both of those pieces featured some familiar looking creatures. One of those pieces featured something that is clearly Gigan. Now, the other piece featured a creature that's probably supposed to be Gamera. So the thing is, we don't actually know what the full plan was there. Were these creatures just placeholders, or were they actually looking to license all those different monsters? Again, I don't pretend to have the answers, but all I know for certain is that Gigan was in an official piece of Godzilla concept art for the Monsterverse. And of course, there is the animated Project Monarch G team that at some point was in development and maybe is still happening, but maybe not. Things are very nebulous there. But O'Shea Jackson did reveal pieces of concept art for what an animated Monsterverse Gigan would look like. And again, that is official. That's real. We don't know exactly what's happening with it at this point, but it is still a clear sign that Gigan is, or at least was, supposed to be part of the MonsterVerse. What evidence do we have for Space Godzilla? The only thing people can really point to are things like all the crystals in the Hollow Earth, which, that's just a thing that exists underground. Crystals can be found in underground areas. But we also have this cave painting image of a blue Godzilla with wings, except Space Godzilla doesn't have wings, and Godzilla in the Monsterverse glows blue anyway. So that's kind of a stretch, if you ask me. Now, there is one argument to be made that it could be Space Godzilla in that the New Empire had a villain who was sort of a foil to Kong. He was an anti-Kong. Scar King is everything that Kong is not. So if Supernova were to follow along that thread with a more Godzilla-focused movie, which last we heard that was part of the plan, then Space Godzilla could be that in this movie. Now, there is, of course, the little wrench to throw in there that we already had Mechagodzilla, as mentioned, and Mechagodzilla certainly served as an anti-Godzilla in Godzilla vs. Kong. But at this point, who knows? Again, maybe there's a way that they could portray Space Godzilla differently if it was indeed Space Godzilla. We just don't know at this point. I'd also like to point out that one of the things that has people speculating on Gigan's presence is that when we saw the title, we had the bright red light coming out of the Supernova title, as you can see right here. And people said that looked a lot like Gigan's glowing Cyclops eye, which, sure, that does kind of invoke that image. But at the same time, if we compare it to the logo for the New Empire, Similar thing, right? I don't know. I'm not going to jump on that as hard evidence just yet. I could, however, go out on a real limb here and suggest that one monster they might be considering, even though he's not necessarily a space monster, I've often wondered if perhaps Megalon was on the table. And the only reason I'm thinking Megalon would be a likely candidate here is because, well, one, we've established a Hollow Earth, and Megalon does come from underground, but also Megalon is one of the more recognizable kaiju here in the States, for better or for worse. I realize that's largely thanks to Mystery Science Theater 3000, but, like I said, recognizable is recognizable, and Megalon is recognizable. In fact, when we got that one board game, Godzilla Tokyo Clash, it featured Godzilla, Mothra, and King Ghidorah. And who was the fourth monster? Rodan, Baragon, Mechagodzilla? Nope, it was Megalon. So clearly Megalon was considered popular enough for that. And of course, Megalon could be present and there could still be a space monster who shows up. Megalon's one and only appearance in the Godzilla series, well, at least in the movies, has him teaming up with Gigan. And in the video games, the Pipeworks Atari ones that started with Destroy All Monsters Melee through to Unleashed, Megalon, once they started bringing in factions, he was consistently allied with the aliens despite being a terrestrial kaiju. So I'm just saying I've often wondered if Megalon could be a possibility. And if we are looking at licensing other monsters, he is a recognizable one, like I said. Maybe he would be on the table. But I have no evidence for that at all, other than just knowing that people know him. But of course, all of this is assuming that it is going to be a recognizable Toho monster. It is also just as likely that it's going to be a new monster and they just haven't finalized the design yet, or they're not ready to reveal the design yet. I don't know. Like I said, at this point, anything is possible. Again, all the clues are pointing to outer space, but we will see. We will see. That's all I can say at this point. For now, though, we still got plenty of time, and I'm sure we'll be getting more clues as the days go on. So, we'll keep our eyes open for that. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni Viewer signing off.